Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're staying dry and warm. What a rainy afternoon here. I'm Emily Lesh, and I'm joined by my colleague Emily Loita from the Agency of Education. And I am helping to lead the Read Vermont work, which is really a comprehensive initiative focused on improving literacy outcomes for all Vermont students, pre-K through 12th grade and also beyond. And we're just so pleased to have everyone here today for this workshop focused on reading comprehension, and also hope that you'll continue to engage in this workshop series. So with that, we've contracted with the Stern Center to provide this workshop series and also job embedded coaching for K through 3 classrooms, pre-K through 3 classrooms and schools across the state, and are really pleased to be working with them on this workshop series. So I'll turn it over to Lee to lead us through this workshop, and I'll also include a link to information about Read Vermont so that you all have that and can stay tuned and informed about the latest happenings here across the state. So thanks. It's so great to see so many of you here.
Thank you so much, Emily. And again, thank you to everybody who's here and has joined us today. My name is Lee Bittler, and I'm the Director of Professional Learning at the Stern Center for Language and Learning. And my colleagues, Monica Krumback, Cassie Budzelik, Elizabeth Keenan, and Amy Ducey are all on this call as well. And you will be working with some of them later on in this session today. But welcome to our Introduction to Reading Comprehension, Strategies for Common Roadblocks, our second session in this series. I'm loving to see all of the introductions in the chat, so please feel free to continue to introduce yourself if you haven't had a chance to. And as we continue on in this session today, please feel free to add comments, questions, thoughts, connections into that chat. It's designed to be interactive, so you can share anything you'd like. You can also feel free to come off mute and share something that might be on your mind or a question that you have. There will also be opportunities to have conversations in breakout rooms and to engage in some other ways during today's workshop, but please feel free to add your voices to the chat and to the conversation. A few housekeeping items. You will need something to write on and write with for today's workshop. And we are going to, at the end of our session, have a survey where you will be able to provide some feedback for today's session, as well as complete that survey for a certificate of attendance that will be emailed to you. And with that, we're going to take a look at our agenda. In the next 2 hours, we will focus on how speaking, reading, and writing are connected, foundational models that help explain the complex nature of reading comprehension, common roadblocks to reading comprehension. We'll move into facilitated role-specific breakout rooms to have some of those conversations in smaller settings. We'll explore ways to overcome common roadblocks. And there will be some time to explore resources and discuss those resources that you explored, again, in those facilitated role-specific breakout rooms at the end of our session today. And we'll close by looking ahead to the future with upcoming workshops and that survey I mentioned before, where you'll have the opportunity to provide feedback and receive that certificate of attendance upon completion of the survey. And before we begin looking at our content, I would like to launch a poll, and this just helps to see the range of knowledge in the room, or the range of where you all are coming into this topic and this conversation in the room today. And so I'm going to, again, just launch this thinking about your knowledge of reading comprehension and common roadblocks, or things that can impact the way in which students comprehend rate your knowledge on that scale of 1 to 5. 1 being, I don't feel like I know much. 5 being, I could lead a workshop or professional development on this topic. Engaging with that, again, it's just nice to see where we all are in terms of our knowledge and the things that we would like to perhaps gain from our session today, as well as your roles captured in the poll. So thank you again. We will reflect on this question once again at the survey at the end of our time together today. And so thinking about the objectives for today's session, by the end of our session today, you will be able to explain the common or the complex nature of reading comprehension, identify common roadblocks to reading comprehension, and leave with at least one strategy and or idea to help you take a next step in your role. This slide is a reminder from our first workshop, if you were able to attend or watch the recording of that workshop. This is an example of a paragraph where we might not be able to understand all of the words that we are reading. And so if you were to read this paragraph on the screen, and if you were to understand most of the words in the paragraph that are real words, you would have 80% comprehension. We can see that not understanding just 20% of the words really makes it harder to analyze and engage with the text on a deep level. When we think about the future and the ways in which things evolve rapidly, we know that the future requires fluent learning and flexible thinking. And reading helps students develop those critical skills. Struggling with comprehension and not being able to understand all of what you're reading isn't just an inconvenience, as we all know, it's really an equity issue. Literacy impacts how we can understand key information like medicine labels, voting instructions, and so much more in our daily lives. Literacy also helps students complete job applications and create resumes, improve job prospects, and improve their overall well-being, which strengthens our communities. And to achieve these things, we need to understand the complexities of reading comprehension and address common challenges. And we're going to start off today by thinking about the similarities and differences of oral and written language. I would love for you to think about those similarities and differences between the language that we speak and the language that we write and read, and those key characteristics. You can feel free to come off mute and share some of those characteristics of spoken and written language verbally, or you can feel free to add some of those similarities and differences in the chat. So what comes to mind when you think of what characterizes our spoken language and our written language? I'm going to pause for about 45 seconds while you either come off mute and share or add some thoughts to the chat. So I see Gina wrote, spoken language is more informal, written more formal. Phoebe wrote, vocabulary knowledge is still important for understanding either spoken or written language. Katie added, spoken language has the benefit of intonation. Summer added, cadence and semantics are useful to both. Absolutely. Kathy added, spoken language tends to be faster while writing is more thoughtful and takes longer. Kristen added, tone is harder to portray in written language. Written language has the benefit of editing. And spoken language is often more colloquial or part of a person's vernacular, although written language can be too. Absolutely. Thank you so much for adding those thoughts in the chat. There's so many good similarities and differences that you're all capturing. So thank you, and continue to do that, please. Much of what you have shared in the chat is also what I'll share next. So you've all captured it so beautifully in that chat. We know that spoken language, like many of you have said, is characterized in part by speakers and listeners being together a lot of the time and taking turns speaking and listening. We can often repeat ideas in spoken language. We use informal language like slang and incomplete sentences. And like many of you have shared, facial expressions, gestures, body language, and intonation all impact and convey the information that we wish to share with others. In general, it's less structured and it relies on a dynamic exchange between speakers. And again, like many of you have shared in the chat, written language, especially academic, formal written language, like essays or novels or informational texts, those types of texts are often removed from the speaker. We're often reading the words of an author we are not necessarily in the room with, or that we might not even know. And language structure is more complex with more tightly woven ideas, and punctuation and text structure convey and organize information. And Pam asked, are you defining spoken language as conversation, not audio and receptive comprehension? That's a great question. And for this beginning example, just thinking through spoken language being more of that conversation, although we know that receiving that audio input and hearing things like podcasts or the sound that we might be listening to as we watch a show or a documentary also include spoken language, but we often also engage in spoken conversation with, or we often engage in spoken language in conversation with others. So it is all of the above, but I did focus mostly on that conversational aspect of spoken language. Thank you for asking that. When we think about the ways in which spoken language and written language are connected and have those differences, we can think about the ways in which we can help connect speaking, reading, and writing for our students. We can help increase our students' skills in all of these areas. And we can do that by connecting our spoken language to reading and writing as much as possible and as intentionally as possible. And we always want to begin with spoken language, since that is a skill that typically develops naturally for most people, whereas reading is not yet a skill that we develop naturally. We can see that literacy and language are interconnected, where speaking, reading, and writing all support one another. And improving skills in one area, like speaking, helps students with reading and writing later on. And because written texts are often more complex than conversational language, we need to help our students use their knowledge of spoken language to understand reading and writing. We know that we can help our students develop their speaking skills by intentionally building opportunities for our students to speak and think about what they're sharing, and help develop those conversational and expressive skills, along with helping students identify and refine how they can ask questions and share information. If a student cannot express their thoughts, they will most likely have some difficulty writing those thoughts down. We want to help build those foundational skills for students for later reading and writing success because we are helping them become familiar with sounds and structures of our language, all of which will help increase their mental dictionaries or vocabulary and their background knowledge. And all of this helps develop their comprehension strategies and skills. And in addition to reading, we can introduce students to challenging ideas through spoken language and by reading aloud to students. And during those read alouds, with students of all ages, not necessarily just our youngest learners, we can ask students to rephrase, make inferences, or predict what might happen next, for example. Language comprehension begins with spoken language, which forms the basis for reading and writing. And while oral language develops naturally for many of us, we still need to support and nurture that in our students. And unlike reading and writing, which don't develop naturally, we are wired to develop those spoken language skills and can use this to build language comprehension. And because spoken language is an evolutionary skill, we can help students understand and use words in their speech before they learn to read those words. For example, in kindergarten, I might not expect students to read the word geography, but I can explain its meaning and carefully create situations in which they're using that word in conversation, hearing that word, and being exposed to that word through oral conversation. We can also build our students' oral language comprehension at all grade levels, beginning in pre-K with the following practices. We can read aloud a variety of rich texts to increase exposure to new words, new knowledge, sentences and text structure, and genres. The more we do this, the more we're exposing students to a variety of rich, unique language using texts that they might not be able to yet independently read. And the more we're sort of priming the pump to increase their exposure to all of these ideas and pieces of information and words. All of this will help them recognize, read, and understand text more easily later on. And we can turn what we read aloud to students into opportunities for meaningful discussions, which can happen at any time, not just during a read aloud. In discussions, we can use sentence stems led by both peers and by teachers to help students talk in a more structured way to lay that foundation for organic discussions later on. We should include time in our lessons for oral language opportunities. Before students write, we want to allow them to discuss their thoughts with a partner so they can process and express their ideas first. We can also use varied academic language in our teaching. For example, instead of always say, or if I were to always say, discuss with a partner, when my students were to engage with a turn and talk, I might try saying, confer with a partner. Confer means discuss. Using some of those more sophisticated words and synonyms can help expand students' oral vocabularies, making it easier for them to recognize and understand those words when they encounter them in print. Now that I've shared some information, I would like you to take the next 90 seconds and jot down some thoughts in response to these questions that you see on the screen. How do you build comprehension through spoken or expressive language? How many discussion opportunities do students have in your classrooms or in the classrooms that you might see in buildings? And so take about 90 seconds to jot some thoughts down. You are more than welcome to add some things in the chat, but you are also more than welcome to just keep this for your own reflection. I will give a 5-second countdown as we approach that 90 seconds. wrap up in about 5 seconds. I see some people have added to the chat. Thank you so much. And please feel free to read through some of what people have added into the chat, some of those ways in which you build comprehension through spoken and expressive language by doing those intentional, thoughtful read alouds, having those turn and talk opportunities, creating spaces for them to ask what vocabulary words might mean, doing things like reader's theater. Again, please feel free to share those ideas and questions in the chat as well. I see that Katie, you had added that you have some questions about opportunities for discussion. So please feel free to share those if you would like. If anybody does have questions, you can feel free to come off mute or add those in the chat, and we can talk through those questions.
If I can just chime in for a second. So to add context, I'm a new elementary educator at age 50 because there's a teacher shortage. And so I dove in, and last year I taught kindergarten, and this year I'm teaching 3rd and 4th grade. I was a college professor previously in the field of international environmental policy. I have taught writing and rhetoric and composition, and I love doing that. And kind of thought, oh, literacy will be a breeze, it's gonna be great. And it's like, actually, no, I can turn your writing into something really juicy and help you care about it that much more. But my goodness, teaching somebody how to do the whole thing is like this whole brand new science, and I'm a brand new freshman and I know nothing about it. What I find as a new teacher, balancing the needs of my schedule, what I'm required to accomplish in the course of a day, is that my student turn and talk opportunities are not very exciting. Nothing seems to really be happening most of the time. Sometimes you can get a topic that gets people really excited, but for the most part, what I would consider the quality of the dialogue is lacking, and the energy in it is lacking. And I also feel kind of, I don't know if rushed for time is actually true, if it's my own anxiety to like get it done, get it done. I mean, I'm so geared to the collegiate level and have been, like, my expectations for what can be accomplished in a 50-minute block is just needing massive, redirection. And so I guess those are my questions, are around not only the time and capacity. I mean, the reader's theater, as somebody mentioned, I thought, oh my God, I would love to be given the blessing to have a whole 6-week block on a theater, where they're speaking and orating and having the opportunity to embody literacy, so that they can learn it, in a way other than this just wit and wisdom model that we're using, which is great, but it's the same all the time. So anyway, how to scaffold meaningful conversations and what to expect from a 9-year-old, what you can expect. I mean, I know there's going to be a floor and a ceiling there, but yeah, I mean, this is all just brand new, so I'm just gonna try to be a listener and not ask a lot of questions, but I just want to lay the groundwork. Like, freshmen over here, came in thinking, woo, this is gonna be great. I love kids, Now I'm like, oh my gosh, I have so much to learn, and it's super overwhelming.
Well, thank you so much, Katie. I think that is so commendable that you have shifted from one end of the educational spectrum to the other, especially jumping right into kindergarten, followed by 3rd and 4th. And thank you for sharing those questions. I will definitely connect with you after this workshop. I'll send you a few things through email. I think another way that we can help students really increase the rigor and the content of their discussions is through scaffolding, through sentence stems and discussion protocols, and modeling with a volunteer or two what those discussions could look like and sound like, so that students can then mimic what it is that you've modeled, perhaps doing a fishbowl where students are watching some of their peers have a conversation using a prompt or a sentence stem to begin that conversation can be a helpful way to center that modeling after you've done it with some of their peers in the class. Just a few brief ideas, but again, I will connect with you afterwards to talk more. And thank you for raising those questions. Darby?
Hi, thank you. Yeah, all of these are great suggestions. One of the things, I teach middle school, I teach 7th grade ELA, and maybe it's just the nature of middle school, but I think one of the things that definitely has to come in, all of these readers theater and sentence stems and all of these other things are great, but it has to be authentic. Kids cue in immediately when you are setting them up saying, here's a sentence. Because I've done it time and time again, but until I have a real authentic conversation and kids believe that you are actually wanting to hear what they think and what they have to say, they don't buy it. And maybe that's the jaded part of me because I teach middle school, but I have had some of the best conversations with them when I am talking one-on-one or in a small group about a great book that I've read and they're reading the same one. And that's where the vocabulary comes in. That's where the just that expressive spoken, really getting into it when they are authentically engaged. And I've been teaching for 25, 27 years. I have a theater background and I've done, the readers theater and all that kind of stuff. It's when they are truly excited about Edgar Allan Poe, or they are truly excited about, we're doing Phineas Gage right now, that they really get into finding evidence in a text. And that's when we have those authentic, expressive language conversations using the vocabulary that I want them to use. I use it, and although it's modeling, it's authentic. And that's when I have the best experiences in my classroom. It's the authenticity that really makes a difference.
Yes, thank you so much for raising that, Darby, especially for all of our students, certainly, especially for our upper elementary and beyond students as they move into middle and high schools, really being able to have that excitement, that authentic conversation with our students to engage them and get them excited in authentic ways are key. So valuable to the ways in which we can model and lead students through those conversations in intentional ways. So thank you for raising that. And so we're spending a little bit of time talking about this language and spoken comprehension because it does tie so deeply with reading comprehension. And we're going to look at how reading and writing skills interact with these spoken language skills next. So when we think about the ways in which reading skills help students, we're thinking that because spoken language is the basis for later reading and writing development and success, we want to build on everything that we do through our spoken language and help connect that to reading and writing. Reading, we know, helps students model what good writing looks like in a variety of genres. It helps students understand how authors organize their thoughts in writing. It helps students strengthen comprehension strategies as they engage in reading a text, and helps them to develop their vocabulary, background knowledge, and also impacts the way that they can form thoughts in their speech or expressive language. Similarly, we know that writing skills help students to deepen their understanding of a text or a concept. Writing skills also help expand students' vocabulary and increase their background knowledge, while also improving spoken language skills. Because written texts are often more rigorous to read and understand because of all those reasons we talked through earlier with the differences between oral and written language. We can help students apply their knowledge of spoken language to reading and understanding written text. And we know that reading comprehension isn't just one skill, it's the result of many different skills working together. And we're going to take a closer look next at all of these different skills that make up the product of reading comprehension. We are going to begin by looking at a model that many of you may have seen before or be familiar with. This is the simple view of reading, developed in 1986 by Goff and Tunmer, which is a simple but impactful model that highlights the two key components of learning to read: word recognition, or the ability to accurately read words on the page, and language comprehension, accurately understanding word meanings. And both of those components enable reading comprehension. If a student is struggling to decode words, their comprehension will be impacted. They might understand those words when they hear them, so it's important to expose students to rich spoken text, especially in our early grades, but throughout all grades. If a student can't understand the meaning of the words they read or hear, again, their comprehension will be negatively impacted. This simple view of reading really helps us understand what makes a proficient reader, someone who deeply comprehends what they read, because they're able to read those words accurately and automatically and understand what those words mean. And we can see that this is a multiplication equation because reading comprehension is the product of being able to both read and understand the words that you read. The more students are able to read and understand word meanings, the stronger their comprehension will be, like we saw in the last session and earlier today with that simulation paragraph where some of those words were unknown words to us. The simple view of reading helps identify students' needs and guides targeted instruction and highlights two key factors in reading comprehension. Again, that word recognition and language comprehension. And these can be combined to create 4 reading profiles. These 4 reading profiles are not hard and fast. They are meant to help us begin to understand where students might fall in a continuum. Students will overlap in some of these areas. They might be placed in various places, and then as their skills change, they might move from one area to the next. As I talk through this model, consider where students that you work with might fall in this 4-quadrant illustration. And so to unpack this a little bit, we have here word recognition skills on the horizontal axis in yellow. We have weak word recognition skills on the left and strong word recognition skills on the right. So for students on that right half of the model would be students who are able to read words accurately and automatically. Language comprehension skills are on that vertical axis with weak language comprehension skills at the bottom and strong language comprehension skills at the top. So when we think about language comprehension skills, we're thinking about if students are able to understand the meaning of words and sentences. We aim for all of our students to be in this first profile in the upper right corner, students who have both strong language comprehension and strong word recognition skills. Those students are able to read any text and make sense of it and engage deeply with what they're reading. We know that students, again, fall in different places with these skills. So students in the upper left profile in quadrant 2 includes students who struggle with reading words accurately and automatically, but are proficient with language comprehension skills. These students might understand stories when they're read aloud to them, but they struggle with reading independently because they're not yet able to read all of the words that they encounter correctly or automatically. In profile 3 in the bottom left, we have students who struggle with both word recognition and comprehension. So students are both struggling to read the words on the page, and when they are read aloud to or in conversation, they are struggling to understand what is being conveyed. And then in the bottom right quadrant, in quadrant 4, we have students who read words accurately and automatically, but they might have difficulty understanding what it is that they read. And so these would be students who can read fluently, but once they are finished reading, they are not able to restate what they read or engage with that text. And so using this model, we can break out that simple view of reading and begin to think about where our students fall and target instruction based on the needs of our students using these 4 different profiles. For example, students struggling with word recognition skills will need more targeted phonics instruction, while those who are reading accurately and automatically but don't understand words or concepts will benefit from building language comprehension skills like vocabulary and background knowledge. So this can be a really useful breakdown when considering, again, your own students, either in your schools or school systems or classrooms, and beginning to target instruction based on where students fall. But we know that there's more to deep reading comprehension than even what is represented here. And this next model, again, one that you might be very familiar with, Scarborough's reading rope, really breaks down all of those discrete skills that make up reading comprehension. And so again, we know that reading comprehension is not one thing. It is the outcome of many different components, skills, and strategies. First and foremost, we know that students need to be able to read the words on the page. And word recognition strands of the rope are on the bottom portion of this model. These include phonological awareness skills, or identifying and manipulating individual speech sounds and syllables in words, decoding skills, or reading words on the page due to their knowledge of phonics patterns, and having the skill to read at a rate that seems as though we are reading as if by sight. Like many of us, we're able to automatically read words that we see in our lives. We can't help but read the words. We want that same skill for all of our students as they solidify their word recognition skills. On the top portion of the rope, we have language comprehension skills, and all of these skills are infinite. Even as adults, we're continuing to build our language comprehension skills by increasing our background knowledge, or the breadth and the depth of facts, concepts, and experiences that we have. We also increase our vocabulary knowledge, or how precisely we know a variety of words. Language structures, or the understanding of a variety of different sentences, can help us understand text as well as oral language. Verbal reasoning, or interpreting figurative language, can again help us really engage with what it is that we're reading or hearing. And then literacy knowledge, or understanding print concepts and genres, can help us understand a text more deeply. If I understand the conventions of a fairy tale, I'm able to make predictions in a much more nuanced way than if I was not familiar with that genre, for example. And all of these skills for language comprehension become increasingly refined and increasingly strategic. We want our students to flexibly use language comprehension components as they read text. so that they can engage with text in a meaningful way. And we can see the rope model is used as a metaphor because all of these strands, while independent, all need to be interconnected and woven together in order for skilled reading to be solidly in place. That skilled reading represents reading comprehension, which is, again, the product of all of these skills. And we want all of our students to have this skilled reading so that they are able to read any text and make sense of it in a deep way. So we can see how reading comprehension is multifaceted and develops over time, and how as adults we are continually adding to our own language comprehension skills and strategies. Skilled reading or reading comprehension relies on that fluent execution and coordination of both word recognition and language comprehension skills. And so next, we're going to move into breakout rooms. These breakout rooms will be facilitated by Stern-centered coaches. And the purpose of these breakout rooms is not only for you to explore information and discuss prompts, but to ask questions from our coaches in the room. And so we'll spend 15 minutes in these rooms having these discussions. I'm going to put the document that we will use to guide our breakout room discussions into the chat so we all have those, and I will show you what that looks like. And so our breakout room document will have 4 breakout rooms, one for educators pre-K through 2, facilitated by Cassie, one for elementary educators, facilitated by Amy, and for teachers grades 3 through 5, one for adolescent educators and adult educators in grades 6 through 12 and beyond, facilitated by Monica, and then our building principals, leaders, and district admin, facilitated by Elizabeth. I'm going to put this document in the chat, and then we'll move into breakout rooms in just a moment. But before I do, I want you all to have the ability to open this document up. We will have 2 different topics for our breakout rooms. Topic 1 will be this first breakout room opportunity, where we spend 15 minutes talking through some of these common roadblocks to reading comprehension. In our second breakout room opportunity, which will happen later on in the workshop, we'll discuss topic 2, overcoming those common roadblocks. And so as you scroll down in this document, you'll see that first topic with Scarborough's reading rope and that reading quadrant profile, and those will help ground the discussion that you have facilitated by your coach in your breakout room. If your position doesn't necessarily fall perfectly within one of these bands, pick the band that you think most closely aligns with your daily role. And we're going to take a quick poll to help us break into these breakout rooms. And so I'm going to launch this poll. You will just simply answer which grade level or role you're most aligned with, and then that will help me make sure that you get into the correct breakout room so that you can all move into the appropriate space for your conversation. So if you just select which grade level or role you are most closely aligned with, that will help us create those breakout rooms. And I will see you in 15 minutes. All right.
Lee, I can share a little bit from our group.
Sure, yeah, please.
Well, first I want to say that 15 minutes went really fast. I mean, we really didn't get beyond the first question. I feel like it flew. So, so I had the pre-K to the younger group. And so we had some nice discussions related to looking at that reading rope, at that Carlin being in kindergarten, was having trouble with that, identifying phonemes in the middle. You could do it in the first sound, the first part of the word, the initial position, but not the middle and the end. We talked a little bit about how that's usually easier. And then they recommended maybe next step looking at that final sound in words. And then also additionally, by kindergarten, he should be answering some WH questions. So there was discussion that he probably, just to be conscious of that he probably had some issues with phonemic awareness to explore further, but also language comprehension. So that was our group talked about.
Thank you so much, Cassie. And if other people have thoughts or questions that you would like to share with the whole group, please feel free to add those to the chat. Next, we're going to take a look at some best practices when it comes to reading comprehension, instruction, and skills, and how we can overcome some of these common roadblocks in terms of word recognition and language comprehension when it comes to that overall product of reading comprehension. When we think about, again, everything that we looked at in Scarborough's reading rope and the 4 reading profiles and the simple view of reading, we can begin to conceptualize all that goes in behind the scenes to what we construct in our minds as we read a text. And so we're going to talk through what's known as the mental model that really shows us everything that goes on in reading and helps understand all of those behind the scenes processes. And so, as we know, reading is a participation sport. It's not a spectator sport. It's something that we engage with. And as proficient readers, we are constantly doing just that. We are engaging with the text. We are questioning the author, thinking about what their purpose might be, making connections, asking questions of ourselves and of the text. And all of these strategies, many of which are unconscious to us at this point, are facilitated by what we're going to discuss on this slide. And we start off by actually reading the words on the page, or the surface code, which are the literal words that we read on a given page. And we can see this with a line from The Great Gatsby, where the surface code reads, "You always have a green light that burns all night at the end of your dock." We can visualize this as seen on the screen quite literally, but to understand the text base, or what F. Scott Fitzgerald is trying to convey to readers with those words, we need to think about the meaning behind those words as well, beyond that literal meaning. Yes, Gatsby does have a green light shining at the end of his dock on a nightly basis, but we are to understand that it's an invitation for Daisy. He is ready when she is. This is the meaning behind the literal words. In order for us to read the words, understand their literal meaning, and then create that text base, or the meaning beyond what we read on the page, we need to involve our working memory and our long-term memory to construct meaning, which is facilitated through our executive functioning skills. And doing all of this creates a mental model, which is depicted by that mixing bowl on the slide. So our mental model is that thorough mix or understanding of what is going on in the text. To create this, we might visualize what's occurring, we might make connections, predictions, or synthesize information in the text with what we know about the time period, what we know about the characters, inferences that we've made, and what's happened up until any given point in the text that we've read. And so we need not only our working memory to hold on to what it is that we're reading, but we also need our long-term memory to pull from our own experiences and what we've read up until the point that we are in the text. And so for us to move beyond those surface code words, or the literal words on the page, and construct that text base, or the meaning the author wants us to understand from the words that they've chosen, we need to be able to create that robust mental model. We can't be reading with half or even a little attention. We need to really be engaged in the text, and we need to be thinking about everything that we know about what it is that we're reading. And so, as we can see, when we break it down, there's a lot happening behind the scenes that really facilitates our thorough understanding or comprehension of the text that we read. But we also know that there are common roadblocks or obstacles that can get in the way of creating this robust mental model. And we're going to take a look at some of those next. Foundationally speaking, when we consider word recognition skills, these can be two common roadblocks for students who are not yet comprehending the text they read. The first is accurate word reading. If students aren't decoding accurately, or if they're unable to correctly read all of the words on the page, their comprehension will be negatively impacted, like we saw earlier. Fluency is the second. If students aren't yet automatic with word reading and aren't yet fluently reading sentences, their working memories will have trouble holding on to all of that information that they're reading, and they might forget what they're reading by the end of that sentence or even that word. And the bulk of their mental energy will be spent trying to accurately read the words on the page, which will detract from their making sense of what they're reading. Students who struggle with word recognition skills would fall into profiles 2 and 3 in that quadrant we looked at earlier. Background knowledge is important because students need prior knowledge to understand a text, even if they can read all of the words on the page. It's much harder to engage with new information that we can't relate to in our own lives or experiences, or information that we already may know. Word knowledge is also critical. If students can read all of the words on the page, but don't understand their meanings, their comprehension will be affected. And we experienced this again in that reading simulation during the first workshop and in that slide earlier today. Students who struggle with these roadblocks might fall in profile 3. And if students can read words with automaticity and accuracy, but are not yet able to do the following, they most likely don't enjoy reading as a result of these roadblocks, or they might lack understanding why reading is important or useful. The first is self-knowledge or executive functioning skills, and the lack of robust metacognitive strategies, which all are common roadblocks for many of our students. Examples of these types of skills include self-regulation, planning, organizing, prioritizing information, and setting goals, all of which are executive functioning skills. Many students need to be explicitly taught and allowed to practice these skills in order to be able to do them independently. Similarly, being able to monitor our own understanding is part of self-knowledge. Can I keep track of whether or not I understand a text, or if my attention wavers? And do I have the skills and strategies to fix those things? Students need to take that active role when reading in order to make meaning. When we read a text as proficient readers, we are asking questions of ourselves and using strategies like rereading and making connections, and we are regulating our attention. We know that, again, reading comprehension is not just one thing. It's that act of making meaning from a text based on everything that we know and everything that we want to know. It really depends on the text, the context, and what we bring to that text, and our moods and mindsets. Just like word recognition skills and other language comprehension skills, we can explicitly teach these skills to our students. The more that we can help our students automatize these skills and strategies that proficient readers use, the less taxing the act of reading will be for our striving readers. I'm going to launch one last poll for today's session, and this is just a question: what are the top 3 common roadblocks you see your students encounter? So out of these 6 that we just briefly discussed, which are the top 3 your students encounter for common roadblocks to their reading comprehension? I'll just be quiet for 45 seconds or so. See, about 80% of us have answered that question. I'll give a few more seconds. All right, so it looks like we have we have many students who struggle with many of these different roadblocks, and it looks like many of us have chosen executive functioning skills as one of the top 3 roadblocks your students encounter when it comes to reading comprehension. So we'll just share that poll so you can see the spread amongst our answers. This is helpful information for us to know as we continue to think about future workshop topics. So I appreciate you taking the time to answer those top 3 common roadblocks. Thank you so much, and thank you for asking questions. If you have them in the chat, we will continue to respond to and answer those. So thank you for that. When it comes to these common roadblocks and other roadblocks that our students might encounter when it comes to reading comprehension, because these are not necessarily comprehensive, these are just a few of what students might struggle with and need to refine, we can think about best practices that we can include in our instruction from pre-K and beyond for our students. These include direct explicit instruction, beginning with what is natural or speaking, beginning with sentences, which are that building block of text comprehension, modeling and providing think alouds, so really letting our students know what is going on behind the scenes as we read and comprehend a text. Because all of this is internal, we need to make what's happening in our minds as proficient readers external for our students to understand and be able to incorporate in their own thinking as they read text. We want to give lots of opportunities for practice, give that immediate corrective and positive feedback, and provide students those frequent opportunities to respond. We can also help students overcome some of these common roadblocks to comprehension by addressing word recognition and language comprehension skills simultaneously. Simultaneously teaching word recognition skills and building knowledge and reading comprehension skills is key. In earlier grade levels, we may focus on that explicit, systematic, evidence-based instruction on phonics to ensure that students have that thorough, automatic, and accurate foundational skill knowledge, but we also want to include comprehension instruction as they develop their knowledge of phonics and word reading. For example, if a student decodes the word bat in isolation, we can talk about the multiple meanings of that word. We can use that word in a sentence and encourage our students to use that word in a sentence in their expressive language. When we help our students refine their word recognition skills at all levels up through adulthood, we want our students to learn phonics sequentially using a scope and sequence from least complex to most complex with opportunities for targeted practice. And we want them to read words in isolation and in decodable text so that they're taking all of what they are learning and applying that to the act of reading and doing that in a controlled way with decodable text, and then moving on from that decodable text as appropriate. Language comprehension strategies can be explicitly taught and modeled to our students as well. We can, again, focus on explicit, systematic, evidence-based instruction on sentence comprehension as an important step in building comprehension and understanding of longer texts, as sentences really are those building blocks of text. We can help students generate questions and answers as they read, not only asking them questions and expecting them to respond, but helping them understand how they can generate their own questions as they read. We can help them summarize in their own words what's going on at various points in the text. We can map out elements of fiction and nonfiction for students to better understand what is happening in the text at certain points. And we can have students monitor their own comprehension by asking themselves whether they've understood what they've read, and if not, what they can do to help fix that. And to overcome all roadblocks, both word recognition and language comprehension, we want to make sure we include lots of practice, positive and corrective feedback at every grade level, help students build fluency through repeated readings of text so that they are able to spend their mental energy thinking about the meaning of the text. We want to expose them to advanced vocabulary, literary devices, and build background knowledge through oral language and rich read-alouds, not only in those primary grades, but beyond, and ensure we are increasing their background knowledge and vocabulary through direct and indirect vocabulary instruction. What we're going to do next is prepare to move into our last breakout room opportunity. Before we're moving into our breakout rooms, we're going to spend some time taking or reading an article to understand some resources that can help students you work with overcome common roadblocks to reading comprehension. You're going to take notes on things that stick out to you, things that you might have questions about, instructional moves that you might want to borrow, and similarities and differences that you notice to your own instruction or that of your colleagues. When we move into those breakout rooms, you'll discuss those notes and articles with your colleagues in that facilitated discussion. We will use the same breakout room document. I'll put that in the chat once again in case you need it. And I'm going to just scroll down or click on this bookmark to get to the second topic we will focus on in this second breakout room. And so again, we're going to, the directions I just spoke are all included at the top of this topic 2 section. And you can see the various breakdown of article based on your grade band. There are a couple of choices for pre-K and primary. For elementary, you're going to read an article about dialogic reading, having a conversation about books. For middle school and beyond, you're going to read an article about planning lessons with complex text. And administrators, you're going to read an article about what principals can do to help students become good readers. I did include some directions and questions for the breakout room discussions in case you'd like to preview those before you read your resource so that you can take notes and have those in your mind as you engage with that resource in preparation for those discussions. So all of these are linked right in that document. You'll have to click on those links to open up the appropriate resource for your band. We will take 8 minutes independently reading and exploring these resources in preparation for a 15-minute breakout room discussion. Are there questions about what it is that we're doing for the next 8 minutes independently? Okay, I'm going to turn my video off, but I will be here. If you need anything, please feel free to pop a question into the chat or come off mute and ask. I'm going to set a timer for 8 minutes. I will give you a 1-minute warning when we are approaching the end of that 8 minutes. When we are completed reading for the next 8 minutes, we will then move into our breakout rooms. All right, happy exploring, and let me know if you need anything. All right, you can pause where you're reading. we are going to move into our final breakout room to discuss what it is that you engaged with your colleagues in that facilitated discussion. I'm going to open up the rooms. We'll spend 15 minutes in these rooms. I'll give you that minute countdown to wrap up your discussions, and when we come back, we will wrap up and close for the evening. I will see you all in 15 minutes. All right, welcome back, everybody. Thank you for engaging in that resource exploration and for engaging in those discussions in breakout rooms. If you have thoughts or questions, again, please feel free to add those to the chat. In closing, so that we have time to take our survey at the end of the session today, I would like you to take 45 seconds and just jot down some of the big ideas that resonated with you from today's workshop. Again, this can be something that you just jot down on a piece of paper for yourself. Just take 45 seconds and write down what were the main things that stuck out to you from today. All right, take about 5 seconds to finish up where you are. Just a nice way to think about everything we've discussed in today's session. So today we talked about the importance of spoken language to reading and writing, the complex nature of reading comprehension, all of what goes on behind the scenes as we understand and work to understand what we're reading, that complex behind the scenes occurrences, and then some of those common roadblocks that get in the way of deep understanding of a text and some strategies to overcome some of those roadblocks. And looking ahead to some of our upcoming workshops, there will be on January 8th, a literacy assessment, what works, what doesn't, and why workshop. In February, an explicit vocabulary instruction workshop. In March, a phonemic awareness and reading and spelling development workshop. And in another in March, motivating adolescent readers. And in April, phonics.